Hey guys, it's S2.
I'm Fjarlar Lovell, and we're both from the Salrath server. We're from the Wikigrisser, and we're going to start doing a video series about not just patches that come out on the global server, but we will possibly start talking about patches that came out on the Chinese server as well. So our goal here isn't actually just to introduce the characters to all of you, because you can get that just by reading the site. We want to try to give some insight into how these characters are actually used in-game on both the Chinese server and how we think the meta might work out in the global server as well. And today we're just going to be talking about the Record of Lodoss War, which will be coming out on the global server very soon. And we'll be talking about all four characters. I think Parn and Pirotess in particular have not gotten as much exposure from people, so I think people might be interested in hearing about them. So we're going to go ahead and put some timestamps up on the screen now, in case you want to jump to a specific character immediately. We can go ahead and start with Deedlit, which is probably the character people are most looking forward to. Deedlit is the character people are hyping up the most, and I think it's for good reason. She's a character that's going to have a lot of lasting power, because she's not just a DPS, she can do a lot of support shenanigans. She has a spell that's very similar to Tiaras' Miracle. She has some minor healing abilities, but I think this is a sort of a pitfall that people are falling into, is that I see a lot of people describing her as an off-healer, but I don't think she really qualifies, because the one heal she has is a 4 cooldown heal that only heals 2 times intelligence. That's actually really weak. That's only slightly stronger than this spell. And Deedlit is not going to be equipping any sort of healing potency equipment, so I don't think it's a good idea to be building Deedlit expecting, oh, she's going to be able to do everything. But I do think she is very useful. She has Gospel, she has Miracle, she has very strong magic attacks, she has really good troops. Yeah, Deedlit's factions are really good. The Time faction and the Origin of Light faction are both really major in PvP. Deedlit just has really good factions. And the thing is like, even if Deedlit doesn't fit the factions you play, she fits into almost any box because she has Gospel.
Exactly, which would be a very perfect second pick for Juggler.
She has ran as an infantry, but even though that's the case, she can still do a decent chunk of damage to Landius. She's not going to be one-shotting Landius, unless it's a Lancer Landy, obviously, but unicorns are just so powerful, and she's going to be able to take a good chunk out of Landius, and if you're fighting against a Juggler, then Deedlit can potentially one-shot him as well. One thing I do want to note is that the forest skill that she uses actually is similar to Lambda's, where if you are running your own Juggler, you don't want to use that skill in close proximity to your own Juggler. Take away your water and replace it with forest.
I heard about that.
Before I was saying the healing, you shouldn't think of her as a healer. What I mean by that is that you use the heal as an emergency heal, and oftentimes you're not even really using it for the heal itself. You're using it for the damage plus 15% it gives.
Right, it's like Estelle, where you use Enduring Hope as an initiator, or like your turn 1 preparation. It's not much of the heal, but more of the effects other than the heal.
Because her talent Act Again works whenever she's in the danger zone and doesn't attack, that means when you cast that Miracle spell, as long as you're in the danger zone, you can actually act immediately. So one thing you can do is to cast that Miracle spell to power up her own damage and then immediately run into attack. And if you're not a big PvP player, I think it's still worth noting that Deedlit is really good for a lot of PvE content as well. Origin of Light means she can be using Jormungandr. Jormungandr, she's a perfectly fine DPS for that. There's plenty of forest in that map. She can wear Meditation Ring to ignore the fixed damage. Valkyrie has Origin of Light as one of its chosen factions, and Princess players can use Deedlit as their infantry option there. Princess faction, she can fight Nidhogg, and Nidhogg, she's also useful there. So yeah, she is pretty useful for PvE content as well.
Well, the hard bond for Deedlit is kind of important because one of the class actually enhances her healing effect rather than entering battle. The damage dealt.
Right, that's the mage class that does that.
Oh, no one uses the mage class. Right?
Nobody. Generally speaking, nobody really uses the mage class for Deedlit for a couple of reasons. First off, Deedlit on her infantry class has more intelligence, and that alone wouldn't have been a deal breaker, because 2 range on mage class and not having the cav weakness is still kind of nice, but the big killer, in my opinion, for her mage class is the fact that her soldiers for her mage class are so bad. She has no sorks, which is just really, really bad for any mage. So generally speaking, you're probably going to be using something like wizards. You can still use unicorns on her mage class if you really want to, because she does have two of her attacks do launch her soldiers, but I think that's just very restrictive. I think it's much better to just accept the fact that she is an infantry unit and just use that.
Yeah, her hard bonds basically says it all, you know.
Yeah, the healing effects plus 10%, like I said, the healing, she isn't really a huge healer or anything, so do you really want that healing effects plus 10% for that one heal she can do every 4 turns?
Yeah, exactly.
Just for a quick comparison, Deedlit's infantry class has 567 intelligence at maxed out bonds and such. Yulia's holy class, or both of Yulia's classes actually, if you max out all her bonds, will have 571 intelligence, so she is just below Yulia in terms of intelligence. She does not have the damage boost that Yulia has, but although she does get intelligence boost from her talent. I guess the other thing to note is that she gets a lot of defense from her talent. On Chinese server, quite a few people ran her with things like Giant Resistance and Star Earring. You can get, and because she makes her own forest tile, she can get really, really bulky, and she can survive assassins. Alright, I think that's all we have for Deedlit. Let's move on to the next character. Alright, next we're going to be talking about the other character of the banner, which is Ashram. I think Ashram has not gotten as much hype. I think that's for somewhat good reason, but I think Ashram is still a pretty good character. What do you think, Stu?
Well, he does suffer the fact that he has to compete with Deedlit. If it was any other banner prior, he would be a really, really good candidate for a good PvP character.
In my opinion, the problem with Ashram isn't really the fact that she's competing with Deedlit. That's not really the issue, in my opinion. The issue is that the meta in the Chinese server has been developing in a way so that Ashram's specific strengths just don't really apply anymore. So Ashram is a really strong single target hitter, and he has a very unique set of 2 attack skills that actually interchange with each other over and over. And one of those skills actually has a passive that lets him revive. So in effect, he can revive himself over and over. In theory, of course, it does have a cooldown, but it means, unlike a lot of revives where it just says you can only revive once per battle, this is a revive that can be refreshed as long as certain conditions are met. But because Ashram is a single target striker, and the meta in the Chinese server has been walking a little more and more towards an AoE based meta, Ashram's strengths just aren't that great. And the other thing is that Ashram has no movement increasing abilities, so he can't even be like Claret or something where he controls the map for you. He's just a kind of bulky and really strong single target character. He can attack first if he has more attack, which is kind of interesting, but it's not going to apply against an AoE team, obviously.
So when I look at Ashram's kit, I noticed that it's incredibly similar to MK's, where for every square moved before battle, a certain amount of stat is increased. And the amazing thing about MK is that she could do a 3 circle AoE and run away. But when you look at Ashram, he has the same talent, but he has Dragon's Breath instead. But he also has a Cav tree, which means he can also use Balance Blade. So you could initiate with Dragon's Breath, survive with his passive, and then counterattack. I think that's the key takeaway with his kit. If anybody decides to use him, they will use him as that.
Well, the Dragon Master class was the more popular pick on the Chinese servers, probably because it has higher attack, but that is an interesting option to use Balance Blade on his Royal Knight class for Dragon's Breath.
Yeah, especially you get Wind Ride, and you could debuff an entire team, so it's essentially a really good skill, especially for a unit like Ashram who can use Cav and Balance Blade.
You did mention that one of the things that makes Mystery Knight so potent is the fact that she can run away 5 squares after attacking, which is just so annoying. But Ashram cannot do that. Ashram has no movement plus abilities. Ashram does not have move again. He doesn't have anything like that. He's also in the dark and strategic faction, which neither of them have any sort of assist skill that allows him to do something like that. Yeah, I think that's a big problem with Ashram, is just his lack of mobility. Even though he does have 5 move as as Dragon Master or Royal Knight.
Although I do think he can fit in a couple AoE rush teams, like just use a strategy with the same collab buff as Joshua, or you could use the same faction as MK since they both have strategic faction, or
Another jokey kind of thing I think you could do with him is because his talent applies on both player and enemy phase, you could actually equip him with a clothesline pole, and if someone tries to attack him from 2 range, if he has higher attack, he'll still attack first.
So basically a worse land use.
He does attack first, so it's more like a worse Sumire.
Well, it depends. Is it going to be worse attack since you're using a washing pole or a hand?
Yeah, that is the problem. Where if you're using clothesline pull, you're probably not gonna. It's much harder to hit that attack threshold where you're able to attack first.
Yeah.
Although you can pair it with something really funny with, like, I don't know. Someone suggested that you can equip Monkey Key Vest on him, so when he gets attacked, he gets plus 12% attack.
Hey, that's actually kind of interesting. You could. Well, he would be.
I don't know if any of these builds would actually work, but these are just interesting things you could probably try with Ashram.
Oh yeah.
But in my opinion, it's probably best to just stick with what his kit, like the obvious thing to do with his kit was just to charge in, attack, because his talent is all about, blocking a lot of blocks and then attacking, get a bunch of attack boosts. You get to attack first, and potentially, I don't know if he can one-shot tanks. He has 601 attack as Dragon Master. Just for comparison, say Claret has 607 attack. Ashram does have 40% attack bonus on and Gargoyle troops, which probably do more damage than probably do more damage than Holy Pegasus, and because he attacks first, he doesn't really need to worry about losing troops while attacking.
Ashram also has Bone Dinos.
Oh yeah, that is
a really good option.
Oh yeah, sometimes these days you see Claret using Heaven's Guard. You could probably do something similar using Ashram on his flyer class with Bone Dinos.
Yeah.
It's most useful to compare Ashram to Claret because they're both flyers, and you might use either one of them to try to kill a tank.
That is true. Claret can't survive.
So the big difference between Claret and Ashram is that Claret is all about diving in. She gets a bunch of damage plus from moving blocks, and she also equips Holy Pegasus so that she won't take any damage as she's attacking something. Ashram doesn't need to worry about not taking as much damage because he gets to attack first. So Ashram gets to charge a bunch of squares, gets a bunch of attack from that, and because of his talent, he also gets to attack first, so he doesn't need to worry about equipping defensive soldiers like Holy Pegasus. He just equips gargoyles or whatever and just goes to town. Although he does not, unlike Claret, he doesn't have Ride the Wind or anything else that increases his damage percentage, which might be a big problem. His soldier bonus is higher though, so he'll probably end up with much higher attack than Claret, but much lower damage percentage.
Yeah. Ashram does have Smash, which is like a budget route. But I'm pretty sure you're not going to choose anything above Counterattack, Dragon's Breath, and Shadow Assault.
Usually for Ashram, you would take both Counterattack and Slayer. So what happens when you take both of those is after you use Counterattack to kill something, you actually have 2 different skill slots that both have Slayer on them.
Whoa, that's actually you could actually make a lot of good plays with that.
Yeah, so when that happens, you have 2 revives in a row, which, you do all kinds of shenanigans with that. So it is a very interesting, he does have a very interesting kit.
Oh my god, we should be talking about that more. Like
I talked about at the beginning how you can refresh and revive over and over if you really wanted to. I
overheard that.
Yeah, so basically what works is his counterattack skill has a cooldown of 5 turns, but the Slayer skill has no cooldown at all. When you use the counterattack skill to kill something, it will become Slayer, which the Slayer's passive effect is it's a revive, and then if you trigger a revive, it transforms back into counterattack. The counterattack skill will have the 5-turn cooldown, so you can't just trigger counterattack over and over and turn it into a revive over and over. You would need to wait for the cooldown to reset. But it does give Ashram multiple revives and a revive that can be refreshed over and over, which is, I think, completely unique to him. By the way, as you can imagine, this would be super useful in Fenrir.
Yeah, I was completely confused because I didn't know counterattack and Slayer were... You could have different skills. They're both independent skills, but when you deploy them, they interchange when you use them, basically.
Yeah, it's just that you can have 2 slots with that skill, basically.
I think that's a really good option because his counterattack is the one that deals the most damage.
Yeah, so a typical set for Ashram will probably look like something like counterattack plus Slayer, and then plus whatever you want. You can have Shadow Assault. Shadow Assault is nice because it lowers the enemy's attack, which lets them attack first. Smash might be nice if you want to, disable a tank. Even Reinforcement might be good for certain situations. And Dragon's Breath, of course, is the obligatory AoE.
All right.
So we're about done with Ashram? Ashram?
Yeah.
Alright, let's get done ramming these asses, and let's move on to the hero of Lodoss War, which is Parn. I think there's a lot of free-to-play players who are very excited to build Parn, and I think he is okay, but he has a lot of problems. Do you want to say anything about Parn, S2?
Yeah, can I start with the first problem?
Okay.
The first problem is that he starts at level... No. The first problem is that he starts at 4 stars. So you're gonna be grinding 100... Is it 250 stars? 250 shards?
Yes, 250 shards from 4 stars to 6 stars.
So unlike other previous free SR characters like Iris or Olivier, they start with 5 stars. So you have 50 days if you're really dedicated to these units. Rather, as Parn, you're going to be spending almost twice as much as you would expect.
Yeah, I mean, the 150 shards to get someone from 5 star to 6 star wasn't a small investment anyway, but they went the extra mile with Parn and decided you need to sweep him 250 shards instead. So that is a problem. If you really like Parn, then, go for it. And, I am the resident protagonist player in my guild, so I might sweep Parn, but I'm going to have to see, but I'm going to prioritize a lot of other units before Parn.
Alright. I don't know much about Parn, so you're going to have to educate me.
Okay, so my basic summary is that I think Parn is, as a freebie, he's pretty good for PvE play, which is, I think, nice for a lot of free-to-play players. He is a cavalry unit. You're probably going to play him as a cavalry unit, and if you play with Matthew, there's not a lot of cavalry units in the protagonist faction. Matthew himself can be a cavalry, but I think it's best to have Matthew as probably an archer or a flyer. The cavalry has some use, but I think Parn is he's a good freebie for PvE content, but he's just not that good for PvP because his skills are so underpowered. He has a lot of interesting things that look nice, but then when you compare them to other units, you'll realize how much weaker he is. So the extent of what he can do in PvP, I think, is that because he has a passive disable attack, which I'll get to in a second, he might be able to one-shot Landius, but only if you give him support. So maybe with Attack Blessing, he would be able to one-shot Landius, and that's assuming you don't get unlucky and a Blood Shield activates or something. And if it does, then, you just blew your attack, and Parn's going to have to wait another 4 turns before he can attack again. So first, let's talk about his talent. His talent is awkward already because he needs to take damage for his talent to activate, and his talent can stack. So every time he takes damage, he gets a certain amount of attack and skill, and at 6 stars, it can stack up to 3 times. So it's a decent amount of stats, but you should not be trying to take hits in PvP. Even if it's an AoE that hits Parn, if it's like a black hole or something, it might cripple him so bad that the talent stack you're getting is not worth it at all. It doesn't really help. The second part of his talent says like, if he has a mobility buff, then he gets a damage increase up to 20% at 6 stars, which is a decent amount. But as you can already see, one of the big problems with Parn is that he gets all these things that other heroes would get in their talent. So, for example, Elwyn gets damage in his talent, or Elwyn gets damage in his talent, or Ashram, as we just talked about, he gets attack in his talent. But he has some pretty strict requirements to activate them. The movement requirement isn't so bad. You can just enchant him with Breeze and then just fish for it. I don't think that's too bad. And of course, his talent also gives him mobility. So if you somehow get the 3 stacks of his talent, he can actually move like 10 spaces, which is kind of cool. But he has a cavalry, which is a problem in itself, and I'll get to that in a second as well. So the most unique thing about Parn is that he has a 2-cost skill called Glory of Faith on its 4-turn cooldown. Very similar to Chivalry, except that, okay, so when you use it, he restores 50% of health, which makes some sense because, okay, his talent, you're trying to look to take damage, and then you use Glory of Faith to probably restore that HP back and then attack. So when you use Glory of Faith, he gets a buff that for every square he moves before battle, he will get 5% in every single stat, up to 25%. And once he uses it, like Chivalry, he can move and attack. But the amount of movement he has for this skill is equal to the amount of movement he has before he finished using the Glory of Faith skill. So let's say you have 8 movement. You can only move 3 spaces and then use Glory of Faith, so you can get the full 5 block run up to something, so you can attack them if you want the full stat bonus. One nice thing about Glory of Faith is that it does, when you use it, buff durations will not be reduced. Thank God it does that, because if it did not, Parn would be so terrible, because if it did not do that, that means when you use Glory of Faith, Breeze would just wear off and then his talent goes away. So, yeah. so thankfully they thought of that, and they said, okay, we're going to make it so that buff durations do not decrease. So Glory of Faith is a pretty good skill, I think. But the problem is that, first off, you need to get the movement buff on him to begin with. And then you need to be in a position where you can reposition Parn in a way so that I'm going to have 5 movement left over, and I can reach the enemy. Also, by the way, the Glory of Faith only allows you to move in straight lines after you use it. So you need to place Parn in such a way that I can say, like, okay, I need to spend the amount of movement I have so that I have at least 5 blocks of movement left over after using it, so I can run straight to my enemy and attack them. And, and even if you satisfy all of that, so let's say, let's talk about the ideal situation for Parn. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and compare him to 2 other units that I think are somewhat similar. I'm going to compare him to Elwyn and Leon. So, okay, first off, Parn on his cavalry class has 579 attack, compared to Leon in his strike master class, which has 620 attack. Lancer Elwyn has 544 attack. So right off the bat, you can see that Parn has more attack than Elwyn, but less attack than Leon at base. Okay, so Parn at 6 stars gets 3% attack and skill for every stack he has. He can stack 3 times. So let's say you have 3 stacks somehow, which is, I think, very unlikely, but you have 9% attack and skill, which is, a decent amount. And then you get plus 20% damage from his talent. Now let's talk about the attack percentage plus. So Parn can get a faction buff, 9% from his talent, and then 25% attack from his Glory of Faith. Elwyn doesn't really have any sort of attack buffs aside from his faction buff, so he only gets 20% attack. Leon will get 30% attack from Chivalry. So here Parn wins out. Parn can get a lot of attack. And finally, damage. Damage for damage plus percent, Parn is sort of in the middle. Parn gets 20% attack from his talent. Elwyn gets 30% from his talent, and it's completely unconditional. That's one advantage of Elwyn, is that he has 30% attack, no prerequisite whatsoever. And the other thing is that because Elwyn faction buffs himself, he has very easy access to another 15% attack from his own faction buff. Oh, sorry, by the way, I meant damage on Elwyn instead of attack. And Leon, typically Leon will get 12% damage from a 3-block run after using Chivalry, so let's just say that. So,
what kind of... Sorry, I'll talk about it after. Go on. I don't want to lose your train of thought.
Okay, so basically, if you look at all of this, Parn in his ideal condition might get a lot of attack percent added on. But the problem is that he has lower base attack than Leon. So when it's all said and done, he might have maybe equivalent attack to Leon, charging at full power. He does have more attack damage percent than Leon does. So that's why I say that Parn could potentially one-shot Landius, because he can get a lot of stats. He has damage plus, and he attacks in melee, which Landius does not have reduction against unless he has bloodline magic armor. But then after he gets all those stats, another big problem with him is that his attack skills are so mediocre. He has his I think his main one is going to be Liberty Slash, which is basically a crappier frontal assault. It does way less damage than frontal assault. The disabled passives only last one turn, and it can be dispelled. So Parn is like a combination of Elwyn and Leon, except worse.
Dude, come on, man. Zilong, you gotta give him the new skill. So Shadow Spear, come on. Like, you give him Roar, but you don't give him Shadow Spear?
Yeah, so my thoughts on Parn is that I think he has potential. Like, Glory of Faith is a very interesting skill, I think, and it does take a lot of planning to use it, but you do get a lot out of it. But in order for him to really break out, he needs to have a good 3-cost skill that's either a really strong like 1.6 or 1.7 times damage attack, or maybe just give him like a different give him an improved Glory of Faith skill that adds even more things onto it. That's the only thing I can see helping him. For now, I think he can be good for PvE, but for PvP, like, I think it's just too much trouble to get him into a situation where he's going to do maybe slightly better than Leon does at killing a tank, which is, Leon's not killing tanks that much these days.
So you talk a lot about Liberty Slash and Roar, which are understandable, really good choices. But what do you think of it? Would you use Parn with Route or Ram?
I think okay. So right now, because you can get 6 costs on characters pretty easily, you can use Glory of Faith, I think, and Liberty Slash, I think, is a must. And then after that, any skill you choose, I think, will be just whatever you think is appropriate for the situation. So Roar is good. Route, of course, is good if you want to push someone into the fog. Ram will be good once he gets a 3-cost skill, because it's nice to have a 1-cost attack skill, because his that's another thing, his 1-cost skills are so bad. So they decided they decided for some reason to give him Iron Wall and Endure on a DPS unit. Like, I don't understand this decision at all. I mean, Parn, if you've watched the Lodoss War anime, he is not like some kind of defensive fighter, so I don't understand why he has Iron Wall and Endure. It doesn't even make sense from like a character perspective. So, like, if you have a 3-cost skill and then depending on what it is, you might equip like Liberty Slash or Glory of Faith as the other skill, and then you have 1 cost left over, so what are you going to take other than Ram?
You mentioned that you compared Leon to Parn, and I'm looking at Parn's troops, and the troop selection that Parn has is very limited, and it looks very discouraging, especially for free-to-play players. What do you think of that?
So I think Steelwing Warrior is actually a decent investment right now, because there's going to be a lot of good characters using Steelwing Warrior later, so I think that's not too bad. Heavy Cavs, of course, are trash. Griffin Knights, I think quite a few people have trained, so Griffin Knights might be decent too. Aside from that, Dragoon is a really obscure unit. Not a lot of people have Dragoon trained, but what I will say is that if you do have Dragoons trained, they are actually pretty good for Parn, because the way Parn is played, you're going to have a 5-block run-up a lot of the time, so that means you're going to get like the full value of the Cav training abilities. So Parn using Dragoons can do probably way more damage than Steelwing Warriors does for him. Although, of course, if you run into a Lancer, then, Parn Cav plus Dragoon Cav. Fighting a Lancer, he's gonna explode.
So at the end of the day, you would choose Dragoons over Steelwings?
I think it's situational. I think they're both good, but in terms of, like, if you are a low-budget player and you can't afford raising an obscure soldier like Dragoons, Steelwing Warriors or Griffin Knights, I think, work fine.
Yeah, I think Steelwing Warriors are really good choices, especially the units that are coming up most of them will be using Steel Wings. Like, Breen uses Steel Wings, aside from Zealots. Eris uses Steel Wings. I feel like I'm missing a couple, but...
Yeah, since I'm a protagonist player, I did make note of that. I recently started training Steelwing Warriors because I realized that, okay, Steelwing Warriors, they'll be nice if I still use Elwyn. Elwyn's kind of on his way out, but, it'll still be nice in the meantime. Reen will be using Steel Wings, Ares will be using Steel Wings, and, if I play around with Parn, he can use Steel Wings too. So I think Steel Wings, I think, are a decent investment. And I believe, I can't remember, but I believe Mystery Knight could use Steel Wings, and...
Yeah.
And that is a flex option for when you think you're going to be running into some kind of magical resistant enemy, or you think there's going to be a Lancer troop in front of something, then you might run Steel Wings on Mystery Knight. Or Knight of Mystery. I'm sorry, I got the name wrong. It's Knight of Mystery.
No, it's Captain France. Get that right. You even proclaimed her yourself, Captain France.
It's Captain France. My bad.
Alright, so his Heart Bond, level 4. His hero, which is kind of strange because you would kind of see his talent to be in his Strike Master class, but it's in his hero. And what do you think about that?
I think overall they decided to give Hero Parn much better heart bonds, which I think makes some sense because I actually kind of like it when they do stuff like this where they make the seemingly weaker class have better heart bonds. So then you're kind of sitting there wondering, okay, do I want the better heart bond or do I want the better stats? Because it's kind of weird when they release characters and it's like, oh, it's like one class is obviously better than the other one.
And the fact that, they obviously thought it out, but they gave us some ideas about how his kit works, and the fact that his AoE, the fact that Strike Master's level 4 Heart Bond is that he takes 10% less AoE damage, works really well with his talent, assuming he can survive Joshua. Assuming he can.
I would be very surprised if he couldn't survive Joshua. There's no reason Joshua should be able to kill someone like Parn. Unless he does like 2 or 3 AoEs in a row and you don't have a healer.
Alright, let me repeat it. Assuming you build Parn tanky enough and if you're building him bulky, you're losing out on DPS unless you're like some sort of mega whale.
Hey, that's why they gave him Iron Wall. They wanted you to equip Iron Wall and be like...
Big brain.
Right. Tanking AoEs, like I said, the big problem with tanking it's not even the damage you take that's the issue. It's the other ways those AoEs might debilitate you. So if Bozel is dropping a black hole, then you might get silenced, you might get all kinds of debuffs. Joshua, if he uses Dark Demise, he's gonna debuff. He's gonna remove 2 buffs. There's just so many AoEs that do things other than just do damage to you. The damage isn't a big deal; he can just heal himself up. It's everything else that comes from the AoE that's gonna be the problem.
So, what do you think an ideal team would Parn? What team would you put Parn in? Looking at the faction, it's kind of hard.
In an ideal situation, if I'm trying to build an effective box, then the answer is none of them. You want to say if you want me to give a non-snarky answer? Like I said, I play protagonist, and I am going to be playing around with Parn. I might use him in Season 3 playoffs, but I don't know, 4-star Parn, I don't know if he's going to be useful at all. Origin of Life faction is a pretty popular faction, and so is Time faction. And like I said, Matthew was around a decent amount too, so I don't think it's too hard for him to get a faction buff. The problem is like, okay, these factions have so many characters that are better than Parn, so why are you going to put him into your box? Although I actually think his talent, think getting his talent up to 6 stars isn't the biggest deal even, because, how often are you going to get, like I said, how often are you going to get 3 stacks on this guy? I would be surprised with 2 stacks, even. Usually, you probably just want to get 1 stack and then immediately charge in, probably. Even without the stacks, if you get a breeze, at least you'll have the damage increase.
Dude, it's really hard to see Parn being viable.
It's like I said, I think Parn should only be a character you use if you really like the character. I think that's really the fun.
Yep.
What I will say is that if you invest into Parn and you like the character, you know, you can make him work. I think that's what I want to say. You can make him work. He can do some things. He's not like Betty, where you get him to 6 stars and you're just kind of like, oh, she sucks.
Dude, that I feel attacked.
All right, any final thoughts on Parn here, S2?
Invest in something else.
All right, let's get to the last and the character everyone was looking forward to, Pirotess. Do you have anything to say right off the bat about Pirotess? So I wrote down some notes before we started recording. So my first bullet point for Pirotess is actually stupid talent. So first time I saw Pirotess, my immediate reaction was that, wow, this character sucks. And the reason I thought that was because of her talent. So her talent, let me just read it out loud, okay? It says, when the unit's life is less than 100%, attack and skill is increased by a certain percent, and before battle, if skill is greater than the enemy, inflict 1 random debuff. So, you know, attack and skill is nice, inflicting a random debuff. You know, it's nothing amazing, but it's functional. My biggest problem with it is that it says when unit's life is less than 100%. When is the last time you allowed your assassin to get hit before you rammed him in to kill something?
And the fact that you're losing troops also affects the overall damage, which makes you want to calculate if it's even worth it, you know?
I mean, a guildie of mine is sort of interested in building Pirotess, and he did point out a few things about her to me that I think, you know, changed my mind a little bit. I think she can be interesting. She does have some unique things she can do, but I still think her talent is so bad. I don't know why they gave her this talent. But like I said with Parn, but this actually works for sure with Pirotess, is that Imelda would work for sure with Pirotess, because Pirotess will deal, or Imelda will do damage to Pirotess, and then her life will be less than 1%, and her talent will be active. She won't have lost any soldiers, and she can go to town. So okay, if you somehow get to pick both Pirotess and you do not get Imelda banned, then go ahead. I don't think anybody is going to be quivering in fear of the Pirotess Imelda combo.
Yeah, dude, it kind of shocks me how Pirotess has such a high attack multiplier on her talent.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Like, her talent gives 30% attack and skill, which is actually a lot, especially for an SR character. So, you know, that's actually a really strong talent. But like I said, the requirement is kind of bad. What I will also immediately note is that Pirotess has 506 attack compared. Let's go ahead and compare it with Zerda in her Shadow class, which has 534 attack. I'm not going to compare it to Demon Zerda because please don't use Demon Zerda. You know, but so you can see right there is that Pirotess has less attack than Zerda, but that actually brings me to the first unique thing about Pirotess, is that she has attack command, and I think she's the only assassin with attack command, which is a very, very unique thing that only she has to offer as far as assassins go. I think
that stood me out too, but I didn't think much of it, because how are you going to position her in a way where at the next turn your Pirotess is going to be alive for the other assassins to follow up?
Well, it's not even about other assassins. Is that, you know, well, obviously that is nice too, but what I'm saying is that even though she has less attack and her troop attack bonus is only 30% as opposed to 40%, that's not as important because she has attack command, and that'll make up for it. So she'll end up having just as much, if not more, attack than any of the other top tier assassins, I think. Obviously, you're wasting a skill slot for that, but you know.
Yeah, it does boost her own stats too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of interesting.
The other unique thing about Pirotess is that she has a unique attack called Infiltrate. It's nothing special on its own. It's just it's from her archer class, so it's effective against flyers. It doesn't pierce guard, but it does. If she has more skill than an opponent, then this will inflict movement -2, and it cannot be dispelled.
So basically, it's literally useless against Overlord badge users.
Overlord badge usage has been dropping to some degree. I think more people have been using Bracer on Landius, and Overlord badge has not been is very, very rare on Juggler as well. I think the character I would compare Pirotess to actually would be someone like Kirikaze. Kirikaze can be quite good in an Origins box. Pirotess, I think, is really bad.
Okay, well, when you think of Assassin, they have like mechanics of going through like last rites. Like Hihi has his AoE, Omega has his 3x guard or 3x skill, and Zerda has his paralyzer. So I don't think she will be able to kill anything at all. Is she gonna have the same treatment as Parn, where you're gonna only have 100 shards?
No, I believe Pirotess actually does come at 5 stars.
They messed up Parn so bad.
You know why? You know what it is like they probably thought like, okay, Parn's way too cool to just be given as a 5-star. You're gonna have to put work into making him 6 stars. But it's like, okay, if you're gonna do that, at least make him good.
They give us Pirotess. Like, I think I would have much preferred a 5-star Parn.
Oh yeah,
than have Pirotess exist at all.
All right, so in terms of upcoming characters, Deedlit and Ashram, I think, like we said earlier, is that because they're limited characters, this is the only time you'll ever be able to get them, possibly, unless they rerun Lodoss, but we don't know if they're ever going to do that. So that does light a fire under your ass, saying you should probably pull for them now. But there are much like really powerful meta characters upcoming soon. Just the next month after this is probably going to be Ares and Maya. Ares is going to be very meta. He's going to be the start of a new faction. It's the Wikigrisser reincarnation faction, and Ares himself is very powerful. The month after that is Shalinka and Elucia. Both of them aren't essential. Shalinka is quite good, and I think Elucia has some application as well, but I don't think they are super important. Month after that is Renata and Licorice. Renata is kind of niche. She's good, but kind of niche. Licorice is really good. And then after that is I believe the Trails of Cold Steel collab. And the Trails of Cold Steel collab is just insane, but that is quite a few months off. I think if your priority is pulling for collab characters so you can get them when they come out instead of, and hope for the actual Wikigrisser characters to come onto Destiny banners later, I would definitely go ahead and pull for Deedlit at least. Ashram isn't as important. So earlier I said that the Chinese meta, the way it's developed, has not been very nice to Ashram. So because of that, if you are a budget player, I would not recommend pulling for Ashram, because you're going to start, if you start sweeping his Gate of Fate, and you finally get him up to speed in Season 4, and it's like, oh, the meta's completely shifted and Ashram's not that good anymore. But if you're a whale, and you instantly get a bunch of shards for him, he is an option, I think, to take into playoffs for Season 3.
Yeah, I think Global has a lot of foresight because we've been looking through the lens of the Chinese server. So, and the fact that Ashram has so little coverage in the Chinese server makes it so that Ashram might be like some sort of black tech.
The thing to remember about the Chinese server is that even though we do get a lot of information from him, our meta has produced a lot of very different players. For example, Zelda M is very famously the Omega player, and almost won it all in last season's playoffs. Omega was not very popular in Chinese meta at all, but Omega has seen a lot of representation in the global.
The fact that Omega was overlooked, it might also apply to Ashram.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much what I meant, is that our meta does end up looking different from Chinese server, even though we do have foreknowledge of how they played. If anything, that's why our meta might look a little bit different, because certain high-tier players might be thinking, okay, a lot of people are going to be copying with the Chinese players, that I need to figure out a way to counter that.
Because you have no idea when the next collab is going to be for Lodoss.
Yeah, I think that's something worth noting, is that if you just like regular Lodoss War, you probably want to roll for both of these characters if you just want to have the characters. I myself, I liked collecting the characters, so even if I don't end up using them, I do like rolling for characters.
Should I be mad if I rolled Ashram instead of Deedlit?
If you roll Ashram over and over again when you're trying to get Deedlit, then you are allowed to get mad, yes.
Yeah.
Alright, so here's the TLDR for everybody. Deedlit, good. You should pull for her. Ashram, also pretty good, but you don't have to pull for him, especially if you are a budget player. Parn and both decent freebies. I think Parn is a better freebie than Pirotess is. But overall, for big investments, don't invest too hard into Parn or Pirotess unless you just really like their characters. I think that's the conclusions we have here. Anything you want to add us to?
Deedlit good, Ashram bad.
That is your expert opinion as to. Alright, I think that's all we have for everyone today. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them below, and we'll be sure to try to answer them next time. See you guys later.